Even the New Jerusalem is a 1983 work of political history by the Canadian author Barbara Taylor. Taylor was born in 1950. After completing a degree in political thought, she moved to England, where she completed a doctoral dissertation entitled Feminist Theory and Practice of the Owenite Socialist Movement in Britain, 1820 to 45. She currently works as a Professor of Humanities at Queen Mary, University of London. Even the New Jerusalem was our first book and was reissued by Virago in 2016. In her introduction to the new edition, Taylor describes the long process that brought it to fruition. In 1983, she was working on an uninspiring doctoral thesis. She read Sheila Rowbotham's 1972 Women, Resistance and Revolution, and the second chapter, called Utopian Proposals, inspired her to switch her research topic. Even the New Jerusalem was, Taylor records, the first and remains the only full-length study of Britain's first socialist feminists. That was in 2016. It gained an audience long before its first appearance. The author tells us, for example, that in the winter of 1976, I taught an early version of Eve over 24 weeks, chapter by chapter, to a workers' educational association class of feminist activists, shivering together in the unheated basement of an Islington Women's Centre. Other discussions and seminars followed. The book focuses on the socialist movement called Owenism that flourished in the first half of the 19th century, but went into decline after the Europe-wide revolutions of 1848, roughly at the same time Marxism first appeared. Marxism, by contrast to the supposedly utopian movements it dismissed, was far less receptive to feminism, seeing the struggle for women's emancipation as secondary to the quest to spark a proletarian revolution. Owenism was named after Robert Owen, a Welshman born in 1771, who became a self-made entrepreneur. In 1799, he set up a mill at New Lanark in Scotland, where he tried to embed novel humanitarian working practices. The experiment caught the imagination of working people up and down the country, especially women. Owen had been inspired by Mary Wollstonecraft's 1792 A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, and he promised that women will no longer be made the slaves of or dependent upon men. Owenism's proto-feminism attracted many talented women from working-class backgrounds. They saw themselves, and were often seen by other Owenites, as central to the movement. Taylor unearths their different histories. Women like Anna Wheeler, Emma Martin, and Frances Wright, who are nowadays generally forgotten, but shouldn't be. In 1825, Owen himself went to America, where there was land available for him to set up more experimental communities. Ultimately, they all failed, and Owen himself returned to Britain, where he died in poverty in 1858 at the age of 87. Part of what makes Taylor's book so interesting is her discovery that Owenism was as radical as anything that came later. In 1833, she tells us, Owen unveiled his plan for a complete takeover of the British industrial system by combinations of workers and sympathetic employers, who would then delegate representatives to a House of Trades, which would eventually supersede the capitalist state. All in all, this is a very thought-provoking book. Marx devoted a long section of the Communist Manifesto to demolishing what he called critical utopian socialism, of which Owenism was the exemplar. But Taylor comments today Marx and Engels' confidence in the emancipatory potential of the spontaneous class organisation of the proletariat looks just as utopian, in the pejorative sense, as any of the Owenites' more extravagant hopes. That may be a little strong for some readers, but I'm pretty sure it's not too wide of the mark. She also says, as the utopian imagination faded, so too did the commitment to a new sexual order, which may or may not be equally insightful. You decide.